My name is Natalie, I'm 31 years old and currently a senior manager at a tech company in Seattle. My job demands absolute focus and a strong will, something I've been honing for over 10 years since graduating from college. I wasn't born into a wealthy family, but I grew up believing that if I wanted respect, I'd have to work twice as hard as everyone else. I spent sleepless nights studying in a tiny rental room just to win a full scholarship. I had to choose between buying textbooks or dinner. But in the end, all that effort earned me a solid position at an age when many are still trying to figure things out. At work, I'm the one my boss trusts with high-stakes projects. My colleagues respect my decisiveness and resilience. My team calls me Steel Natalie, not because I'm cold, but because I'm clear, fair, and never let emotions interfere with work. But beneath that tough shell, I know I'm still just a woman who wants to be loved, cared for, and have someone's hand to hold after a long, draining day. I'd had a few relationships in the past, but they all ended quickly. Partly because I was always busy, and partly because some men couldn't handle dating someone with higher income or status. One even told me to my face, "You make me feel like less of a man." I laughed it off. But that night, I sat in front of the mirror for a long time. I didn't know what I was doing wrong. Then one early spring evening, with the cold Seattle rain still falling, my close friend Ashley invited me to her husband's birthday party. I didn't want to go. I was exhausted from back-to-back meetings, and squeezing into a crowd of strangers had never been my thing. But Ashley begged, "Please, just an hour. You're my bridesmaid, don't say no like that." I reluctantly agreed. And that's where I met Ethan. He wasn't the kind of man who swept people off their feet at first sight. He didn't stand out, didn't talk much, and didn't try to impress. But his smile, gentle and genuine, put me strangely at ease. "You're Natalie, right?" he asked, approaching as I stood alone with a glass of wine, gazing into the distance. I nodded slightly. "How did you know?" "Ashley told me that if I saw a beautiful woman standing alone looking like she regrets showing up." "That's definitely you." I burst out laughing, for the first time in weeks. We talked the whole night. It felt effortless, honest, and straightforward. He worked in HR consulting, was my age, and had also been through a few failed relationships. We shared life perspectives, told each other random things, and eventually exchanged numbers. I didn't overthink it at the time, I just felt light. Then Ethan started reaching out. Morning texts, checking in after my long meetings, sending cute dog videos just because he knew I had a golden retriever when I was little. I began looking forward to his messages. And after 2 months of getting to know each other, he said he wanted something serious. I don't believe in fairy tales. But when Ethan said, "I don't care if you're more successful, make more money, or come home late from work, I just need to know if you're happy with me," my heart stirred in a very real way. I said yes. And a year later we got married. I thought happiness had finally found me. But I was wrong, so wrong. Our wedding was simple and warm, held in a small garden north of Seattle, where we had our first date under the drizzling March rain. It wasn't glamorous like the stuff of dreams, but to me, that moment was enough. Because the man standing beside me had held my hand through some of life's toughest days. Ethan's parents, Carl and Diane, surprised me at first with how open and kind they were. Diane gave me a hand-knit shawl, saying, "Just a little gift for a daughter-in-law who works in an office. It's easy to get chilly." Carl would joke around with Ethan in front of me, saying, "The boy's lucky to marry such a smart and strong woman." I laughed a lot at those family dinners. I even thought maybe I really did get lucky. After the wedding, Ethan moved into my 2-bedroom condo in the city, close to work, near a park, and just a 15-minute drive from my office. Married life felt peaceful in the beginning. We split house chores, cooked together on weekends, and every night before bed, Ethan would place a hand on my forehead and whisper, "Good night, my wife." Then one October evening, just after I returned from a client meeting in Portland, Ethan said, slowly, "There's something I want to talk to you about, my parents." I sat on the couch and slipped off my heels, my feet sore from the day. "What's going on?" "My parents' health hasn't been great. Dad has high blood pressure and Mom's getting forgetful. I'm really worried." I nodded. "Yeah, I get that, but we don't exactly live close." Ethan paused, then said something that made me freeze. I want us to move in with them, or at least convert their old house into a duplex. I looked up. You mean fully move in or just live nearby? Make it a duplex. Their house is big, has a backyard and solid foundation. If we renovate, we'd have our own space and still be close enough to care for them. I already talked to a friend in construction. It'd cost around $100,000. I let out a breath, longer than I intended. It wasn't about being selfish. I understood children had responsibilities. But the thought of giving up our independent life to live right next door to my in-laws, even with a wall between us, made me uneasy. Ethan saw that. I know what you're thinking, but I promise, no one's expecting you to play the traditional daughter-in-law. My parents are easygoing. They really like you. I didn't respond right away. I asked for time to think, and for the next week I carried that question around like a small pebble in my shoe, barely noticeable but impossible to ignore. Finally, one Friday night after dinner with his parents, I said yes. Diane's eyes welled up. Thank you, Natalie. I know this isn't easy for you. I smiled, but something inside me tugged, soft and nameless. A few weeks later, Ethan and I started working with the construction team he knew. They designed 2 separate living spaces connected by a shared hallway with a lockable door. From the outside, it looked like a townhome. Inside, it was 2 different worlds. Ethan was excited, choosing tiles, wall colors, garden plans. I, on the other hand, started to feel like I was stepping into a project that I wasn't fully in control of. I was included in the conversations, but big decisions like taking out loans or selecting materials seemed to come more from him and his parents. One evening, while I was reviewing the detailed budget sheet, I asked, "Babe, so how are we splitting the $100,000 0 cents cost between both sides?" Ethan looked a little caught off guard. "What do you mean?" "I just want to know the breakdown. How much are we paying and how much are your parents paying?" Ethan was silent. A long, very long pause. Then he spoke softly. "I was hoping you could front the money for now. My parents are going through a bit of financial trouble." I sat upright. "Are you saying I'm covering everything?" He held my hand. "Not everything. Just helping for now. I'll pay you back over time." I didn't say anything more, but inside me a door quietly creaked open, and behind it wasn't light. I didn't yet realize that door would lead me to a truth. One that would shatter everything I believed about the word family. One weekend evening, when the renovation plans were nearly finalized and the workers had started laying the foundation, I decided to sit down with Ethan to go over the financials more clearly. Up to that point, I had fronted nearly all the initial costs: design fees, construction deposits, and material down payments. I'm not the type to nickel and dime, but I don't like being kept in the dark either. "Ethan, can you show me the total costs and the budget breakdown? I need to keep track of everything I'm paying." He looked at me and scratched his head. "Yeah, I'll check. But Natalie, there's something I should probably tell you first." I looked up, my heart slowing like I'd just stepped into a sudden draft of cold air. "My parents, they're actually in some debt," he said slowly. "It's not massive, but it's significant." "How much?" "About $140,000. I nearly dropped the glass in my hand. "Say that again," I said, trying to stay calm. $140,000? For what?" "Dad invested in a coffee shop chain a while ago, but it didn't work out. Then he took out another loan to pay off the old one. It just kept rolling over. And I'm only finding out about this when the house is almost built?" Then avoided my gaze. I wasn't trying to hide it, I just thought I could handle it. But now it's all piling up. If we don't do something soon, they might lose the house. I was silent. A flood of numbers and what-ifs hit me all at once. I had already spent close to $85,000 0 cents on the renovation. And now this debt. I was in too deep. "What do you want me to do?" I asked, my voice dropping. Ethan took my hand. "I know this is a big ask, but can you help my parents? You're the only one who can save them right now." "And what about you?" "Pay you back, I promise." I gave a faint smile. Not because I was happy, but because in that moment I realized I wasn't just a wife. I was being treated like a financial solution. But I still loved Ethan, or I thought I did. And so, I said yes. I pulled $70,000 0 cents from my savings and transferred it to cover the bulk of his parents' debt. The rest I scheduled in monthly installments of $5 0 cents. Every payment documented with receipts and transaction records. Diane called me, crying as she thanked me. Carl even emailed me a handwritten letter, calling me a blessing this family is lucky to have. I used to believe that. But over time, little things began to feel off. Ethan stopped contributing financially. The "I'll pay you back" never happened. Every time I brought it up, there was an excuse. Delayed paycheck, funds tied up in a project. When I asked to see his pay stub to rework our budget, he snapped. "You don't trust me? Why does it always come back to money, Natalie?" I didn't answer. I was tired, but I kept paying. A year later, after I made the 13th payment, Diane called, cheerful. "You're amazing. Almost done in just a year. Honestly, if it weren't for you, we'd be out on the street." I asked, "How much is left now?" "Just around 25,000, sweetie. You really are this family's savior." I hung up, frozen. 13 months, and I had spent nearly $120,000, 0 cents. No contract, no legal paperwork, just trust. Then one night I came home early from work because a meeting got canceled, and froze outside the living room door. Laughter spilled from inside, Carl's voice. "Gotta hand it to Ethan, he found himself a wife who not only brings in the money, but knows her place." Deanne chimed in. "The debt's nearly paid off, house is renovated, that girl's a diamond in the rough." Then Ethan, with a hint of sarcasm. "Yeah, but once it's all done, maybe I should cut her loose. Sooner or later she's gonna start asking questions." I don't know how long I stood there clutching my purse, heart pounding so loud I couldn't hear. But I knew one thing. This wasn't a life I was building. I was the target of a plan set in motion long before I ever said I do. From that night on, I was no longer the same Natalie who laughed over dinner, who believed in warm hugs and silent forgiveness. I didn't scream. I didn't confront. Instead, I turned quiet. Like a calm surface hiding a storm building deep below. I kept paying. On time, no reminders. $5,000, 0 cents a month from my savings and paycheck to cover the debt. On top of that, renovation bills kept trickling in like a cruel chorus on repeat. Tile invoices, painter fees, new window installations for the shared living area, all of it on me. Ethan's smile never changed. Every evening he'd ask what I wanted for dinner, occasionally hug me from behind while I was cooking, rest his chin on my shoulder and whisper, "Thank you, Natalie, I know you're doing so much for this family." I'd nod, but inside I felt nothing. I began digging into Ethan's finances. One Saturday afternoon, while he was watching football with Carl, I quietly opened my laptop and searched for any record of income he had ever shared with me, which, I suddenly realized, he never had. Since the day we got married, I had never once seen a real pay stub. The last time I asked about it, he put his coffee cup down and said, irritated, "Why do you think I'm hiding something? You already know I don't make much. Are you accusing me now?" I didn't tell him that I wasn't just suspicious. I knew something was wrong, but without proof I stayed silent. I kept contributing, kept covering everything. By that point I had poured more than $110,000, 0 cents, into the house and his family, nearly all the money I had saved over the last 6 years. And yet, strangely, Ethan always had money for other things. A new pair of limited edition sneakers. The latest smartphone just weeks after release. A weekend fishing trip with brand new gear. I didn't know where he was getting the money. But it wasn't from me. One time, I gently asked, "Could you be more transparent about our finances so we can manage things together? Because right now I'm covering everything." Ethan paused for a few seconds, then said, "You're doing it because you're good at it, not because I asked you to. If it feels like too much, then don't do it. I'm not forcing you." I gave a dry smile, the kind of smile only a woman who realizes she's being used can master. Not loud, not angry. Just the smile of someone who's no longer naive. I didn't ask again after that. I also stopped sharing account numbers or balances, but I started documenting. Every debt payment, every material invoice, every bank transfer, every message Ethan sent asking me to help. Just one more time. I didn't know what I'd use it all for, but I knew one day I would. My in-laws still acted like they adored me, still called me the little angel of the family, still brought me their homemade apple pie on weekends as if I wasn't the one single-handedly carrying the debt they created. They didn't know I had overheard that conversation that night. They didn't know their words from "she earns money like water" to "once the house is done it'll be easy to cut her loose" echoed in my head every time I opened my wallet. Ethan still thought I believed in him, and I let him think so. Because I'd learned, a strong woman doesn't need to scream to prove her power. Sometimes silence is the foundation of a perfectly calculated counterstrike. I didn't know exactly when this would end, but I knew one thing. The next time I spent money, it wouldn't be to pay off debt. It would be to buy back my freedom. One rainy Wednesday afternoon, typical Seattle weather, I got out of a sudden meeting with Korean partners and headed home 3 hours earlier than expected. I thought I'd swing by my favorite bakery for some chestnut cookies, then head home and cook dinner for Ethan, something I hadn't done in a while because of work. As I turned into our street, I noticed Carl's silver SUV already parked in the garage. Odd, since it wasn't Sunday. They usually only visited on Sundays. I quietly opened the door, leaving the hallway light off. Raindrops dripped from my hair, but I didn't notice. Laughter and voices floated in from the living room. "That girl really is a gold mine, Ethan." Diane's voice rang out, sharp like shattered glass. "Remember the first time I met Natalie? I couldn't believe she was the kind of woman who'd be so easy to reel in." Carl chuckled. Then Ethan chimed in. "It's simple. Just act like you care, say a few sweet things. Women like her, tough on the outside but always craving love deep down, am I right?" "Totally," a woman's unfamiliar voice added. "I'm still shocked she bought into it so easily. This house is practically hers now, most of the debt's paid. Just stretch it out a few more months and done." I froze. The air thickened, like someone had filled every crack with glue. I didn't know how long I stood there, just that my hand was gripping my bag so tight my knuckles went white. Then I did the first thing that came to mind. I turned around and walked out as if I'd never come home. That night I texted Ethan saying I had to stay at a hotel due to visiting international clients. He replied with one line, "Stay safe, love you." I stared at the message, didn't reply. Inside everything shattered, but from those shards I began piecing together a plan. I didn't cry, didn't rage, didn't explode like some drama scene. I hit record. The next time I came home, I brought a tiny recorder tucked into my coat pocket. I acted tired, buried in work, as if I didn't notice that night's dinner included a new woman, introduced as a business associate. I smiled, poured wine, made small talk, but inside I was capturing every glance, every fake smile. I also quietly compiled a complete breakdown of our financial history, every dollar I had spent over 2 years of marriage, renovation, debt payments, living expenses, all of it logged in a confidential file. I sent a copy to my attorney with a note, "Do nothing, just keep this." Then I began the process of transferring the house into my name. Initially, for the sake of transparency, I had suggested we be co-owners, but now I had someone handle the transfer of Ethan's share to me under the pretense of property tax optimization. He signed without a second thought. And then, a week later, I pretended to be the old Natalie again, the tired wife, still cooking, still asking about his day, still loving. Meanwhile, I was counting down to the perfect reveal. They had no idea I'd quietly filed for divorce. No idea I had purchased the remaining debt under special terms, making me their new creditor. No idea that the soft-hearted girl they planned to discard now held every card. And when the time came to expose the truth, I wouldn't yell. I'd simply open the door and invite them out of my life, one by one. Not with bitterness, but with proof born from their own lies. I used to think I was a rational woman. Smart, grounded, immune to emotional damage. But when your heart is manipulated so subtly, you learn. The deepest wounds aren't caused by blunt force. They come from small cuts, repeated quietly, every single day. I kept playing my role, the devoted wife, the ideal daughter-in-law. I kept smiling when Ethan hugged me from behind, kept nodding when my mother-in-law called me the family's pride. I even increased the monthly payments to pay off their debt faster, just so they'd believe I still trusted them. They didn't realize those were the last dollars I would ever give them, not out of love, but out of contempt, carefully wrapped in calm. In the 18th month of my steady payments, I called the bank holding most of Carl and Diane's debt. As the original guarantor, I offered to settle the remaining balance in one lump sum, in exchange for full assignment of the debt to my name. It didn't take long, they happily agreed. From that moment on, I, Natalie Parker, was officially the holder of my in-laws' debt note. 1 week later, I completed the paperwork to transfer full ownership of the renovated house, where the whole family now lived, into my name. Ethan didn't question anything when I told him it was for new state tax processing. He signed the documents with a half smile and a distracted look in his eyes. I remember that moment so clearly. Only one sentence echoed in my mind. "Thank you, Ethan, you just handed me the key to end all of this." I quietly began working with my personal attorney, filing for divorce in King County, with every detail kept strictly confidential. During that time, I gathered all the necessary evidence: bank statements, receipts, emails, and especially the audio recording from the night I accidentally overheard their discard her plan. My lawyer, Claudia Weston, a sharp and composed woman in her 50s, looked at me after our first meeting and said, "If I were you, I wouldn't get angry. I'd wait, and when everything's ready, I'd press the button. Right time, right target." I responded only with a thin, emotionless smile. The night before everything was revealed, I cooked as usual. Ethan's favorite lasagna, a salad for my mother-in-law, and lemon butter cake for Carl. I even poured the wine and raised a toast to finally, almost being done with the debt. Ethan beamed, eyes shining. "I can't believe you pulled this off, Natalie, really. You're the best thing that's ever happened to me." I lightly tapped his glass, looked at him deeply. "I think so too, Ethan. Thank you for showing me your true self so early on." He didn't understand what I meant, but I did. And I didn't rush to explain. The next morning I woke up early and left the divorce papers on the kitchen counter, along with a copy of the official debt transfer naming me as the new creditor of Carl and Diane, and a short note. "Good luck negotiating with your new lender. I have no intention of being generous." I walked out of that house and moved into a small penthouse apartment I had secretly purchased using profits from a private investment I'd been nurturing for the past 3 years. The place overlooked Elliott Bay, where the sunrise reflected on the water every morning, a reminder that peace isn't something granted, but something you take back with your own hands. That afternoon, my attorney sent formal notices to Ethan and his parents. They had 3 choices: repay the remaining debt in full within 60 days, vacate the house immediately, granting me full control, face legal action for failure to comply. I didn't stick around to see their reaction, because I already knew some relationships aren't worth saving, and letting go at the right time is far better than letting trust rot into something irreparable. And the only thing I regretted was not realizing sooner that sometimes forgiveness isn't noble, it's just weakness in a moral disguise. I thought I'd made the clean break, that I had the upper hand when I left the divorce papers and walked away from that house in silence. But I forgot one thing. People who survive off others will always fight back in the ugliest ways when they feel threatened. Just 3 days after the divorce paperwork was submitted, Ethan texted, asking to meet and talk things out. I declined. I told him all communication should go through legal channels. He didn't reply. I thought that was the end of it. But that Saturday morning, as I was getting ready for an investment seminar downtown, I got a call from my property manager, Mr. Wallace. His voice was urgent. "Natalie, I'm sorry to bother you this early. Someone just changed the locks at the Lakeview property and claimed you no longer own it. I just got a call saying a woman has moved in with Ethan." I froze. Without waiting another second, I drove straight to the old house, the house I renovated with my own money, hand-picked every tile and chandelier. The gate had a new lock, but I had a spare key from the original set, and I had already filed the ownership transfer documents with every local authority the moment they were finalized. I rang the bell. The one who opened the door was Ethan, wearing the white dress shirt I gave him for his birthday 2 years ago, but this time, he didn't greet me barefoot at the door like he used to. He stood in the doorway, calm and steady. "Natalie, I think it's better if you go back to your new apartment. This isn't your house anymore." I looked at him and said nothing. Behind him, I saw a young woman with loosely curled blonde hair walk out of the kitchen holding a glass of orange juice. She smiled like I was some uninvited guest. "That's my new girlfriend," Ethan said, like he was announcing a new pair of shoes. I stayed silent. "Oh, and one more thing," he added. "My parents think you could still live here if you agree to a few conditions." I raised an eyebrow. "Conditions?" Yeah, you can stay here, but you'll need to pay rent, and, since the house is more crowded now, it'd be great if you could handle cleaning, laundry, and cooking. I laughed. A long, unrestrained laugh. Ethan took a half step back, probably caught off guard. You're telling me I have to pay rent and do chores in a house that's legally mine? Ethan shrugged. Well, you kind of moved out, I just rearranged things a little. I pulled my phone from my pocket and quickly dialed a familiar number. Hi Claudia, it's me, I said when the line connected. Get ready to file for trespassing, unlawful occupancy, and violation of property ownership. Yes, the entire ex-in-law family starting today. I looked Ethan dead in the eyes. No softness left. You have 3 hours to pack up and leave my house, with your girlfriend and your parents. If not, the police will be here before lunch. His face went pale. You can't do this. Natalie, we were married. Were, I emphasized, and you ended that. I'm sorry, but didn't you say you still loved me? You once told me. I've said a lot of things, I cut in. But I never said I was stupid. I turned and walked toward the gate, feeling lighter than I had in 2 years, as if I had just set down 100-pound weight. Ethan didn't follow me. He knew it was over. And I knew this wasn't revenge. This was justice. And in a world where women like me are labeled too strong to be loved, this wasn't just a statement to Ethan, but to everyone who ever thought independence was there to be exploited. 3 days after that confrontation at the old house, my lawyer personally sent a formal demand letter to Ethan and his family, clearly stating 3 points. The Lakeview property was legally under my name, fully registered with King County's property records. They were unlawfully occupying it, and if they did not vacate within 7 days, I would file a civil suit for eviction. The remaining debt, over $60,000, hadn't been paid off, only deferred due to bank negotiations. From this point forward, Carl and Diane were fully liable, as they were the original borrowers. Claudia attached all necessary documentation, bank statements, financial guarantees, the debt transfer contract, and supporting evidence. Every detail was covered. That afternoon, Ethan called me 5 times. I didn't answer. He texted. I know you're angry, but we can work this out without turning it into a war. I replied with just one line. Let your lawyer talk to mine. I also proceeded to file a civil suit against Ethan and his girlfriend, the blonde woman I saw in my kitchen that day, for adultery and breach of marital ethics. In Washington, while adultery doesn't directly affect divorce rulings, if there's financial harm and evidence, the guilty party can still be held accountable under civil law, alimony included. I had everything: recordings, photos, texts, and even a statement from a delivery worker who had seen her coming and going while I was away. Claudia filed a compensation claim for $75,000, including emotional distress, personal property damages, and legal expenses. But it didn't stop there. I also filed to recover the $60,000 I had fronted during the renovation and debt repayments, complete with transfer receipts and a handwritten IOU Ethan had begged me to sign when he first asked for help. They were cornered. What used to be a loosely held facade had now become a complete picture, one painted in betrayal and covered in fake smiles. Ethan finally showed up at the first mediation. Gone was his smug confidence. He looked exhausted, face drawn and tense. He looked at me and quietly said, I know I messed up, but Natalie, if you push this, I'll lose everything. I replied coolly. You bet everything the moment you betrayed me. Losing it wasn't my doing, it was yours. His girlfriend didn't show up for the hearing, but through her lawyer she sent a settlement offer, willing to pay part of the damages if her name remained confidential in court. I accepted, not because I forgave her, but because I knew. The sharpest blow doesn't come from shouting, it comes in silence. And I wasn't done playing my endgame. As for my ex-in-laws, after receiving the demand letter, they called me in tears, pleading, painting themselves as victims. Carl choked out, Natalie, you were once our daughter-in-law. Do you really want to destroy this family? I cut him off, my voice steady. I'm not destroying anything. Your family just assumed I didn't know how to fight back. Now I'm simply taking what's rightfully mine. They fell silent. I knew with people like them, those who never admit fault, loss is the only lesson that ever sticks. But I wasn't waiting for them to change. I didn't need them to. My life had already moved to a new chapter, one where I held the wheel, and no one could grab it from me again. Ethan and everyone on his side had become nothing more than side characters in a story I had already cleared from my shelves. I never thought I'd one day sign papers to sell the house that was once my home, the place I poured so much time, money, and emotion into. But I finally understood. No matter how beautiful a house may be, it's just four walls if all it holds is lies and manipulation. The Lakeview property was reappraised after renovations, and with the real estate market booming, I received an offer just 1 month after listing. A young couple offered $200,000, 0 cents, exactly what I'd hoped for. They loved the dual-space layout, especially the kitchen I had redesigned from scratch. After deducting all the renovation and personal investment costs, I walked away with a net profit of over $40,000, 0 cents. Not a huge amount considering the time and pain it cost me, but more than enough to mark a fresh start, one free from old memories. During divorce mediation, the court approved my claim for alimony compensation. Ethan was ordered to pay $35,000, 0 cents over 12 months. The girlfriend, despite trying to downplay her role, had to pay $15, 0 cents, to avoid being publicly named in court. Carl's family, facing legal pressure, repaid the $60,000, 0 cents I had fronted, not out of goodwill, but to avoid being sued for breach of signed financial agreements. All in all, I recovered over $150,000, 0 cents, between the house sale and settlements, but the most valuable thing I gained wasn't in dollars. After the storm, I started taking investing seriously. I used to think saving was enough. Now I know. Modern women need more than just stable income. We need sharp financial minds. I enrolled in a personal wealth management course, hired an independent advisor, and learned to read markets not with emotion, but with data. Slowly, the pain lost its grip on me. I realized I could shape a better future. On my own. Without a crutch. Without needing love to feel whole. One autumn afternoon, I stood on the balcony of my new apartment, overlooking the Seattle waterfront, the sunset spilling golden honey across the sky, and it hit me. I was living the life the old Natalie once dreamed of, but never believed she deserved. I no longer kept in touch with Ethan. I didn't care whether he and that woman were still together. That wasn't my story anymore. I had closed that book, not torn it up, not denied it, but left it exactly where it belonged, the past. My parents, who once didn't understand why I chose someone like Ethan, are now closer to me than ever. They never said you were right, but the look in my mother's eyes when she visited my new place said enough. My father, always the quiet type, just patted my shoulder and said, "You're stronger than I ever imagined." I smiled. I didn't need the words. I already knew I wasn't the same Natalie anymore. I am Natalie, the woman once seen as easy to use because she loved too hard. But now, I love myself more than anyone else ever could. I haven't shut the world out, but I do choose carefully who I let in. Not out of fear, but because I've learned, not everyone who gets close is there to lift you up. Some are just there to take what they can. And if you ask me whether I regret loving Ethan, I'll say no. Because without him, I wouldn't have learned where my limits are. I wouldn't have known how far I could go once I let go. And most importantly, I would never have discovered that sometimes the thing we most need to let go of is the very thing we once thought we couldn't live without. But I've lived. And I'm living better than ever. Natalie's story is powerful proof that love doesn't always return loyalty, but learning to love wisely, and especially to love yourself, is what matters most. After the pain, she not only reclaimed justice but emerged smarter, stronger, and more grounded. She refused to let heartbreak define her and instead used it to build a life she finally deserves. A reminder for all of us, letting go at the right moment is the first step to true freedom. What do you think of Natalie's journey? Did she make the right choice by standing up for her worth? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt family stories.